I'm Councillor Ian Edwards and Chairman of the Central and South Planning Committee. Warm welcome to you all and to anybody who may be following us on our live council YouTube channel. Fire alarm, one not expected. If it does sound, we will be evacuating. Out the doors you came in, and then the double doors off to the left and down the stairs. We will be going with you, so don't worry about it. If that's blocked for any reason, there are fire exits behind us. Can I ask everybody to please have their mobile phones turned to silent and any other mobile device they might have. And members of the public, thank you for coming. That's great. We do encourage you to provide feedback. Residents' feedback forms are available. We do encourage you to complete those, and anybody who may be following us online, you can also do that online. We welcome those. Before we get into the agenda, I'll just introduce the people around the table. There's a lot of us, and you may wonder who's doing what. As I say, I'm Councillor Ian Edwards, and I chair. The voting members of the committee are councillors. I only vote in the event of a tie. I'll introduce you to the councillors. Councillor John Morse on my far left-hand side, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Beera, my far right-hand side, Councillor Brightman, Councillor Chamdow, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Ahmed Walana, and it does say Vice Chairman David Yarrow, but it's not. Thank you. That's thrown me completely. Anyway, what was I saying? The other people around the table. Far left-hand side, Nicole Cameron is our legal advisor. Neil Fraser, Democratic Services and Minutes Clerks the meeting. James Rogers, Head of Planning and gives expert planning advice. Meg Harani is a planning officer manager and will be presenting each application. And Ahmed Akram is our highways engineer and will give us expert advice on highways. Sorry? He has done. Right, let's get into the agenda. Apologies for absence.
Yes, apologies, Chairman, have been received from Councillors Dillon and Councillor Yarrow, with Councillor Morse and Councillor Tucker present as their substitutes. Thank you.
Thank you. You're most welcome. Declarations of interest matters coming before the meeting this evening. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to declare a declaration of interest in agenda item 17 in part 2. I'm not sure whether I reported it, but I might have. I'm certainly aware of it, so to avoid any conflict of interest, I will be leaving the room.
Thank you. I think that is the best way forward on matters like such as that.
As a non-pecuniary.
Non-pecuniary interest, yes. Colleagues, item 3, sign and receive the minutes from the previous meeting, which are within the pack. Do they agree? 9th of April? Agreed. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4. There is one matter that's been brought as an urgent item that has been circulated under agenda B. It's part 2, which I'll explain in a second. It relates to an enforcement issue, and I have agreed that should be brought to the meeting this evening. Agenda item 5 is to talk about part 1 and part 2. Ladies and gentlemen, part 1 of the meeting is the meeting held in public which you are most interested. It is the planning applications. Part 2 are matters relating to enforcement, and because the discussion and the actual issue may end up in court or prosecution, those matters are considered in private. We will break between part 1 and part 2, and we also break the YouTube link at that point. Okay, and we do have items in both part 1 and part 2. So when we come to the end of part 1, if any members of the public are still present, at that point I will ask them to retire. That is the speedy bit of the meeting. We now get into the substance of it, which are the planning applications with a petition, and the first item, agenda item 6, is 1A Bath Road, Heathrow. Mr. Harani.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to 1A Bath Road, which is a detached building which in 2006 gained permission for use as a conference centre and function suite, and this is an application for an increase in size, if you like, of the function suite with the provision of a detached building for outdoor activity. It's a covered area, and there are a number of issues that need to be addressed with this application. The first is the principle of the development. The second is its impact on adjoining occupiers, and then the issue about its location next to or within a site of Borough Metropolitan Grade 1 importance of nature conservation. In terms of the principle of the development, the site is within the green belt, and as set out on pages 13 and 14, there are a limited number of uses which are acceptable within the green belt, and function suites and so on are not one of those uses. So there needs to be clear and definite reasons why development should be allowed in the green belt which doesn't comply with those requirements. No such information has been put forward by the applicant, and therefore in principle we're saying the development is unacceptable. In terms of its impact on the nature conservation, the site is part of a what's called a SINC, a nature conservation site of metropolitan or borough grade 1 importance, and again there are policies within the local plan and in the emerging plan which require evidence to show enhancement or preservation of these conservation issues, and again no evidence has been provided to support those issues. Finally is the impact on adjoining occupiers. The nearest residential properties are across the Bath Road, some 50 metres away. We have had objections to the proposal, pointing out that the existing use does result in some level of disturbance and noise to existing occupiers. This use is supposed to be in the open, whilst it is set some distance back from the highway. There would be no control over how the activities take place across the whole site, and therefore again no evidence has been provided to show that the impact would be acceptable in terms of noise surveys and so on, and this is set out in the addendum sheet, which is an amendment to the report on section 7.08. So again that is a reason for refusal. If I can just provide a verbal update as well. In terms of reason 4, policy DMEI 6 is not the relevant policy, it should be 7. If I can ask members permission to substitute number 7, DMEI 7 in place of DMEI 6. If I can just go through the plans. That's the site of the covered area. This is all open land, as you'll see from the photograph. There is a distinct separation, although the site is all one, there is clear separation between the built-up area here and this, as you'll see from the aerial, and that shows the site in the green belt. And these are the proposed plans. As you can see, there is clear separation between the existing, clear separation between the existing activity area and the current. The water course is the dotted line there, and that's the actual suite itself. And then where the trees are situated is the actual area that you saw above from the aerial shot. So this is the water course adjoining or right next to the site, and this is the Bath Road and the residential properties across from there. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Roger.
Members have heard that Mr. Riley asked for delegated authority to include policy DMEI7 to make sure the reason properly correlates with the wording of that policy. May I ask for delegated authority to do some minor tweaks to the reason? I won't be altering any of the key issues in terms of what the reason is seeking to address. It's just to ensure that the precise wording correlates with DMI 7. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We know, and we will consider that when we come to that particular issue. We do have a petition here. Ms. Harjit Kaur Hassan present? No. The applicant or agent, Mr. Singh or Mr. Parfit, are they present? No. That makes it easier. Any of the ward councillors? Also, no. Fantastic. That then takes us straight on to a discussion now by colleagues. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. It seems to be completely straightforward. This is totally unacceptable development in the middle of the green belt. It's a classic case of straightforward refusal as far as I'm concerned. So I will move that subject to other members' views.
And you, Councillor Tuckwell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just to concur, for me, it doesn't meet any of the tests for special circumstances, and I'm happy to second movement.
Thank you. Subject to delegation to the Head of Planning to review the wording of refusal reason 4 to ensure its compliance with DMI 7. Okay, so it's proposed and seconded. Show of hands, please, on that one. That's unanimous, and that application is refused. Agenda item 7 has been withdrawn. Agenda item 8. 51 Sweetcroft Lane. Mr. Ronnie.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to 51 Sweetcroft Lane, which is set back some distance from Sweetcroft Lane, and it's for the demolition of the existing dwelling and its replacement with 4 detached dwellings. Again, there are a number of issues that have been highlighted. First is the principle of the development, and the second is its siting and appearance. In terms of the principle of the development, this is set out on page 43. There are policies within the London Plan, within the National Planning Policy Framework, and within the Council's Local Plan Part 1, which seek to restrict the development of garden land and to make sure that, or to ensure that any new development within an area is in character with that area. In this particular case, it's considered that the siting of the buildings, the restricted space around them and so on, means that it is not in character and therefore doesn't comply with those requirements. And I would point out the comments of the Conservation Officer on that. This is in an area of special local character, Hillingdon Court Park, and the character of the area is reflected by space around the buildings, wide plots, and sort of large gardens, and the proposed development, if we can go to the plans, doesn't reflect that character, and therefore we feel that it should be refused on that basis. So if I can just go through the plans. This application is in outline form. These are the various floor and elevation plans. Then this is the existing building, this is the access leading up to it, then surrounding buildings. So in terms of its appearance, it tries to reflect existing buildings such as this one, but obviously it's not as large or set within as large a plot. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We again have a petitioner, Mr. Chris Buckley. You're present. If you'd like to come forward, sir. If you make yourself comfortable, you will see before you a microphone, and towards the front edge a large button. That is the toggle on, toggle off. The microphone needs to be on, otherwise your petition is not captured. You have 5 minutes speaking time. To assist you, we will use the lights. 4 minutes on green, 1 on amber, and on the 5th minute, the red light comes on, and I must draw you to a close at that point to be fair to everybody. So, at your own convenience, once you turn the microphone on, we will start the clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Chris Buckley from 15 Portman Gardens, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the other members of Portman Gardens who have submitted the petition to oppose this proposed development. We have a number of concerns with the development. The principal one, as has been noted already in the planning report, is that it's being situated in an area of special local character, Court Park, where the houses in Portman Gardens and Sweetcroft Lane are large detached buildings. In Portman Gardens, every single house is 5-bedroom house. These are the proposed buildings are noted as being 4-bedroom houses on 2 floors. In fact, to fit them in, they're really only 3-bedroom houses on 2 floors. The 4th bedroom will be in the roof space. So that's simply because there isn't enough room to squeeze them in any other way in the plot size. The houses in Portman Gardens also have double garages and at least 2 car parking spaces on a drive. As far as I can tell, the ones in this development have a single garage and 1 car parking space. And that's important for a later point I'll come back to in a moment. The second key point for us is the removal of trees that are necessary for this development. The tree report indicates, I think, there are 11 trees that are removed. Obviously, for any sort of development, it's necessary to accept that there may be a few trees that have to be removed. But for this development, that just seems to be an unacceptable number. There is no space within the proposed development for planting of any similar large trees as there are in the surrounding area. A particular concern we have is 2 trees that are to be taken out to allow the proposed extension of Portman Gardens, one actually on the site and one in Portman Gardens itself. Those trees are just completely removed to allow access, or a different piece of access to allow the site to be developed in the way that's proposed. There is existing access from Sweetcroft Lane, so we can't see why it's necessary to extend Portman Gardens. The Committee on Climate Change recommended today, in fact, that the UK should seek to achieve carbon neutral status by 2050. And the Minister for Business accepted that report on behalf of the government and pledged the government to work towards accepting that goal. There is no chance that we will be able to do that if we just take out trees and don't replace them. And I think the events of the last few weeks even, the climate change protesters in central London, just show how important that situation is and how much it's actually changed really just in the last few months in the public's awareness. So I think any new development really needs to take a very serious look at particularly the trees and the planting that have to be removed for any sort of development like this. The last point is around the access. extension to Portman Gardens that's proposed does not include a turning circle. That means that any delivery vehicles, refuse vehicles that go down there to service those houses will then have to reverse up the road for quite a distance. The road in the road there are a number of families with young children, and they play football and cricket out in the road. My daughter certainly did when she was a little bit younger, and having vehicles just having to reverse up the road is clearly a very serious safety issue. Sorry, the lights aren't working at all. Okay. Yes, yeah. So basically, we can't see any reason for the extension of Portman Gardens. It's clearly unsafe when the existing access from Sweetcroft Lane could be used. So those are our objections.
Thank you very much. And I apologise the lights weren't working. That was something we hadn't noticed. I do hope, though, that allowing you to complete that way hasn't detracted from your petition. Colleagues, before you go, sir, can I just ask you just to remain, in case there are any questions from the committee members around clarification of what you said. Colleagues, are there any questions of clarification only at this point? No, thank you. Thank you, sir. If I could invite you please to return to your seat. Is the applicant, Mr. Kavanagh, or the agent, Mr. Gillette, present and wish to speak? Please, sir, if you'd come forward. Again, I remind you, the microphone needs to be turned on for you to speak. There will be 5 minutes speaking time. Unfortunately, the lights will not be working, but I will advise you when there is 1 minute remaining. Okay, so it's your own time. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jim Kavanagh. I represent Harrington Properties. I've seen all of the objections. I don't quite agree with some of them. I mean, it is at early planning. It's only an outline. The extension from Portman Gardens is a natural extension. Portman Gardens was built many years ago by Berkeley Homes, and the only reason they didn't extend into number 51 and number 49 was because they couldn't buy the land. All the services are brought up right tight to that boundary. I mean, and it's just there is no. I can't see I can't see why people at Portman Gardens are saying that it's ruining the landscape when we're just replicating exactly what they've already had. As far as the highways, I mean, highways has had absolutely no objections to it whatsoever. So I can't really see what all of the objections are. It is an outline. We can amend it. As regards to access from Sweetcroft Lane, I think it's quite difficult. It's a very tight road. There's no proper sight lines, so I just think it'd be quite difficult. The trees, we've had a proper arboricultural report. Again, there are trees to be removed, but there are trees to be planted as well. And the trees that have got to be removed, some of them are semi-diseased, and they are and they are quite old. We have spent some money on trying to look at the trees and seeing what we can do. But in closing, I just think it's a natural progression of Portman Gardens. I don't think it's going to. It's not on the green belt. It's not going to detract from the green belt. It'll be screened from the green belt by the new trees. So I don't actually see what the issue is, and I don't think it should be refused, or I think that we should be looking at ways that we can improve on the scheme to allow it to be gone forward. That's really it. I'm not good at public speaking, as you can see.
So that's absolutely fine. If you've made all your points, that is perfectly okay. Colleagues, are there any questions at all with the petition, the agent in response? Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. It does say in our report that it's anticipated they'll close the access road to Sweetcroft Lane. So what would that be? Would that just be a long strip in one of these plots?
To be honest, we haven't thought that through at all, or else we would probably sell it onto the next door neighbour because
Right.
And that's exactly what happened to the other properties when Portman Gardens was built, because all the originals had exactly the same houses going all the way down there.
Okay, thank you.
Colleagues, any other questions? Sir, sorry, Councillor Brightman.
Thank you, Chairman. Is there any reason why you've chosen to build 4 houses in such a small space rather than perhaps 2, like the other streets, the other sides of the street, the rest of Portman Gardens, sorry?
I don't believe the site is as narrow as it looks. I mean, the actual houses are getting smaller. I appreciate the houses on Portman Gardens, they are quite wide because they have double garages. So it's probably just a different street. So yeah, we could be accused of trying to squeeze in the houses, but I think there could be more of a market for smaller houses now. The actual 3-bed houses rather than the large houses on Portman Gardens. But the site is actually quite wide. Wider it looks perhaps on the plan.
Thank you very much. So, I invite you to please return to your seat. And colleagues, yes, of course you may. Mr. Roger, please come in.
One of the key issues being raised is trees, and if I can comment on that. So what's happened is the applicant, a borough culturalist, has effectively commented on each and every tree to be removed and has identified that there's trees with decay in the stem, that there's basically various issues that are reasons why they deduce that none of the trees to be removed are of particularly high quality. The council's tree officer has then in effect verified that. However, and effectively that is why there's not a third refusal reason. However, 11 trees is quite a lot of cumulative tree loss. So what I would like to suggest, Chairman, to the committee is you may wish to add, I'd like to recommend that we add to refusal reason 1 and the words "and cumulative tree loss" at the end of the 4th line and policy DMHB14. So it's not that there's any individual tree of significant amenity value, but there's the cumulative amount of tree removal is actually part of the reason that this has a harmful impact on the character of the surrounding area. So I think it would strengthen reason 1 if those additions are made, Chairman.
Thank you very much. That's noted. Colleagues, this is a matter now for your discussion, please. Councillor Tendler.
Councillor...
Oh, sorry. Councillor Graham, please come forward.
Good evening, Chairman and Committee. I'm Councillor Ray Graham, Councillor for Uxbridge North Ward, and I'm here this evening to speak in support of the petition against this proposed bulky and incongruous development, which, in my view, is rightly recommended for refusal. I'll be brief because I don't want to reiterate all that's been said, but it's right that I should comment accordingly. As well as being contrary to various local plans, it is mentioned in the report that the 51 Sweetcroft Lane site is within the Hillingdon Court Park area of special local character, and as such fails to harmonise and would have a detrimental impact on the general local appearance, and is to some extent a back garden development. And I'm pleased to hear the comment about the reaction to the suggested removal of trees. Furthermore, the plans as presented do not reconcile with the pattern of built local developments in terms of scale, proportion and mass. The result would not lead to an overall enhancement of the locality. Also, in my view, the site is too narrow and restricted for 4 houses. The proposed new means of access to the site via Portman Gardens rather than by a driveway from Sweetcroft Lane is completely unacceptable, I think. The petitioner has commented on the turning circle and the fact that there is currently a protected tree at the end of Portman Gardens. That situation needs to remain as it is. In conclusion, I'll simply say the officer report is thorough, and I hope, therefore, that the committee will firmly endorse the decision to refuse this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, are there any questions at all of the councillor? There being none, my apologies to you for overlooking you. Thank you very much. I invite you to return to your seat. I'm not always I don't know what came over me, so Councillor Graham, I do apologise. Right, colleagues, this now is a matter for discussion. Councillor Tupwell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, in view of what we've seen and heard in the last 10 or 15 minutes or so, clearly this development isn't in keeping with the street scene, which is sort of fairly unique, and has been mentioned a couple of times as special local character. But the main point for me is the unacceptable loss of trees, and on that basis I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Duly amended. Councillor Bellman, you're seconding. Any other issues or questions wishing to come out? Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I mean, I'm happy to go along with this recommendation as it stands, but there are a number of issues that arise. One is that the property that is to be redeveloped is in itself tandem backland development. So this actually removes a piece of tandem backland development, and Portman Gardens are existing, is an existing road. The width of these new plots is about 12 metres wide, I believe, something like that, which I do not regard as too narrow. I'm not arguing with any of this. I can see where the feeling is coming from and the wish to preserve the special character that there is in that area, and I think we all know that area and we all value it. Certainly with the loss of trees, if they're going to close this access way or it's not going to go down to Sweetcroft Lane, they could simply plant it full of wonderful trees, couldn't they? I mean, I want us to be firm about why we're doing this. Otherwise, I can see this going to appeal, and certain points are going to be addressed and be answered. And that's why it is already residential land. It's already backland development from previous years. It's extending an existing road. It's not carving a road through back gardens. It's not doing any of those things. It is producing detached dwellings. This is an area of detached dwellings. It's not so out of character. I mean, our own policies say that there should be a mix of type and dwelling, size, etc. You know, we don't just clone existing development. I'm just wondering how strong these reasons for refusal are. That's all. That's all I'm saying. But, you know, I appreciate that when you look at this, yes, it doesn't look anything like that. But the whole of our borough is transforming, and the policies that we're having to implement, and I know for some of us it causes great concern, is for higher and higher densities, so that things are being called in because we haven't put enough development on the site. So it's just having to bear in mind those considerations. If we are going to refuse things like this, it needs to be as tight as possible. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duncan. On the issue of the backland, I do not see, and I'm looking again at it, that being mentioned in either of the refusal reasons. And I know whether this is or isn't backland development is a moot point. And I don't believe the decision turns on that issue in itself. I think the issue being put here is around the detrimental impact on the character, and it being an area of special local character, and that being around large properties as described. It is for the committee to form a view on that, and that is the whole purpose of having the committee process. You have raised some observations, and they are noted. However, I will bring in Councillor Morse in a second, if I may. However, I just want to make sure that you are content that there is no reference in either of these refusal reasons to the issue of backland development, and that is just an issue discussed within the body of the report.
It does say, 1, 2, 3, fourth line, as well as the proposed loss of existing private rear garden area, which can be interpreted as that. You might want to have that rephrased in a slightly different way.
Well, sorry?
I mean, what we're effectively doing is, as officers, we think this will have an unacceptable impact on the area's special local character, and then we're drawing upon all the different policies we think that could support that at appeal. So there's a counter argument: if we start deleting policies, we might lose ones that actually help us at appeal. But Meg will.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Duncan is right in sort of saying that this isn't backland development. We don't, and I think it's recognised that it isn't backland development, and in principle we don't have an objection to the intensification of development on this site. And the question for us and for the committee is whether the development that's proposed is in character with the area, and that is a requirement of the policies that are set out in Reason 1. And we're saying that because of its siting, the space around the buildings and so on, this isn't in character with the area of special local character, and that is the reason why those policies are set out. None of those policies actually relate to backland development. The Council's policy on backland development is H12, and that isn't within any of those reasons for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harani. Can I just ask, is the word rear necessary in the fourth line then? I mean, does it add anything or weaken anything if that wasn't to exist? It was just say existing private garden area.
I think you're right. Again, I did mean to mention that, but forgot. It is, if we just say the loss of garden area.
Just for completeness, I think following on from what Mr. Harani said, we should delete the reference to policy H12 in paragraph 7.01. As Councillor Duncan is right that in the body of the report it cross-references policy H12, but we're okay in terms of the refusal reasons. So if we could, through the minutes, effectively remove or include a suitable wording that I'm removing reference to H12 from paragraph 7.01, because as Megji's advised, it shouldn't be there.
Okay.
It's at the very end of para 7.01.
So on page 44, 7.01, removing that reference. However, that does not impact on the substantive refusal reasons laid out within the report. There has been some observation concerning that. We are proposing the removal of the word rear on the fourth line down, so it's just existing private garden area, and adding the words and cumulative tree loss. Yes?
Yeah.
And we would delegate that to the head of planning, should it be agreed.
Sorry, and adding policy DMH B14, because that basically is the one in the local plan, part 2, that relates to cumulative tree loss.
Yes, thank you. It has been proposed, it has been seconded. I presume those changes make no difference to that position? No, thank you very much. And Councillor Morse wishes to come in.
I apologise. I'm slightly at variance with Councillor Duncan because the original building cannot be background development because there's no policy against it. Well, there is no policy against it. And if you look at this, the London Policy Plan 3.5, paragraph 53 of the MMPF, and particularly, I would quote the reviews by the inspectors, particularly on the closeness of it to the green belt, and the fact there was a very strong view that against this development. I think we're in very safe grounds in terms of a refusal, and I'm totally in agreement with the officer's proposal. But we're going to vote for it anyway.
Thank you. I just think for the matter of clarity, the planning inspector reference is not directly related to this development, is that correct?
Not related to this development. There are various other not backland, but similar type developments which we've referenced.
That's the point, and I believe that's why the reference was made, not that it directly related to this application, but the circumstances may apply.
I apologise, I didn't put the thing again, but that's my point, why I think that is a highly relevant point.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, sorry to protract this, but just for clarity, I wasn't saying that this development at 51 was against a policy, simply that it is backland development. It's just a matter of fact that it's tandem development, not that it was against any policy, even though it is now.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please, on this one to go with the officer's recommendations as amended by the head of planning? Thank you. That's everybody. That application was refused. The refusal reasons given as amended by the tree loss. Turning now, please, to agenda item 9.
Thank you, Chairman. This relates to 544 Uxbridge Road, and it is an application for a change of use to part retail, part tattoo parlour, to a restaurant use. This is a site which is within the primary shopping area, and the requirements of the primary shopping area, the Uxbridge Road, Hayes Town Centre primary shopping area, and the council's policies set out the requirements for that. And the main requirement is that at least 70% of the frontages within the primary shopping area should be in retail use. The latest survey that the council has shows that at the current level it's 54% or just over 54%, so it's well below the 70% threshold that we have. This is a use that is operating at the moment. The tattoo parlour is not operating. The retail use is still in use, and therefore we feel that its loss is unacceptable in principle, without evidence to show that it has been marketed for a substantial period of time, and so on, which are normal requirements. Thank you, Chairman. If I can just go through the plans. That blue shows the extent of the primary shopping area, and as you can see, the main bulk of it is a retail use. The tattoo parlour was in a single-storey element to the side, as you can see there. So the tattoo parlour is this single-storey element here, and then the main retail use is adjoining it. And as I say, the tattoo parlour is no longer in operation, but the retail use is continuing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, this appears relatively straightforward, and I might be a hostage to fortune in saying that. It is against our policy. It takes us well below the threshold, and more importantly, there is a viable business, so we're told, existing there. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I agree, Chair, and I would move officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Borough.
I second that.
Thank you. Show of hands, please, on this one. That's unanimous. Thank you. That application is refused. Agenda item 10.
Thank you, Chairman. Very quickly, if I can point members to the history section on page 69, they'll see that a development was approved for 5 two-bed self-contained flats, and this is a variation of that, a minor change to it. If I can point out the amendment that's been made, it is, an extension, this element here, which is beyond. So if you can see the columns that are on the ground floor layout, then it's this extension above the columns, so it's about metre and a half wide. All the other elements are as per previous approval. What it does is obviously it increases the size of the flats above there. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry to be pedantic here, Mr. Harani. Could you clarify where exactly it is on the plan? Because I believe you were referring to a different part of the building.
Yeah, so...
My apologies. Okay. A minor change, colleagues. Hands are largely tied. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, thank you. I welcome this development. It used to be a little single-storey car showroom, and I'm glad that it has been developed. It's been, well, you can see from the pictures, unused for a while. There's residential development, some of it over shops adjacent. This finishes off nicely. It's got parking. I move officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chapman.
Can I ask a question about parking? I'm not questioning the amount of parking that's available on the site. Would it be, bearing in mind Ewens Road is a parking management scheme for residents, would it be possible to put a conditional on excluding the occupants of this building from being able to participate in the Ewens Road parking management scheme?
We only normally put restrictions when there's a parking shortfall, and we think that will need to pressure, but that doesn't apply here because this is there's no problem with the parking provision on this development.
Well, there is a problem with parking provision on Ewens, and on the basis of what you've just said, there's enough parking within the scheme for the residents, so therefore presumably they don't need to park on Ewens.
So the officer view would be this development's providing enough parking such that the residents shouldn't have any need to park off-site, and on that basis it would be onerous to ask the applicant to then enter into a legal agreement restricting access to parking permits. I think that's how I'd put it.
Getting agreement from the legal officer as well. Yeah, Thank you. Councillor Toll.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Keeping on the theme of parking, it's good that we've got parking, but can I just inquire why we're not future-proofing it with a condition maybe for the provision of electric parking points, and also there's nothing in relation to cycle parking provision?
Two very good questions.
It's actually a very good point, because I'm in the process of checking reports for a forthcoming committee, and a similar scale development, I've actually just amended a report to add one electric charging point. So the only, of course, the difficulty is there's only a very minor change to the scheme. But if so, it would. Yeah. So I guess the question is it reasonable to add a charging point? But if committee are happy to, then it wouldn't be out of sync in terms of how we're dealing with other applications.
It would seem very appropriate for me that we do that, and if there were any issue, just remind that a higher number of parking electric points are required for new applications moving forward, and actually only one amongst the 7 is a very reasonable settlement, if I may put it that way. So we're amending condition 6 to include one active electric
and cycle parking.
And cycles, I was going to say. Okay, happy with that? Councillor Chapman?
I hate to be one who always asks about waste management, but where's the bin store going to be? Bearing in mind, the only spaces I can see that are available are effectively blocked off by car spaces.
Another good question.
I mean, looking at the ground floor plan, you've got 3 spaces on the left, 4 on the right. The only potential places I can see are at the top of both of those columns, so to speak, furthest into the site.
Mr. Rackham.
So it wasn't actually shown on this proposal. So the last scheme, the bin storage point was located. If Mr. Harani can pull up the site plan, it was actually shown outside or just above the most northeastern parking space, just below the stairwell. I think that is.
Right.
Yeah. So that's where it was located on the previous application. It's not actually shown on this one, but given it's an outline proposal, it could be conditioned during reserve more details. So that's but we did pick up on that.
Thank you. So inclusion of that as well within the landscaping condition. So that's one active parking space, cycles storage and waste bins storage. Okay. We did move. We did second. Now show of hands, please, on that one. Everybody, thank you very much. Cheers. Agenda item 11 has been withdrawn. Agenda item 12. 21 Belmont Road.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for the use of the undercroft for an office use and the provision of an extension to the roof to provide 8 additional flats. Members will note from the history that there has been a prior approval for this building to convert it into 14 flats, and this would be an additional 8 on top of that. With regard to the prior approval, members will know that planning officers are restricted in what can be taken into account when dealing with that. So issues such as the size of the units, the impact on adjoining occupiers and so on, we can't take into account. All we can take into account is the parking and the flooding issues and those issues. So with the limited number of issues that we're allowed to take into account, prior approval was granted for 14 flats. The additional 8 flats would be restricted in terms of their parking by not being allowed to apply for parking permits. This is a Section 106 requirement, and so given that, we feel that the loss of the existing parking is acceptable. And in terms of its design and appearance, there have been changes to it, and it is now, this is the existing building. And that's the proposed, so it's mansard on the top floor with the dormers. I can just go to the photographs. That's the existing building, and it's pretty similar being proposed to the adjoining in terms of its design and appearance, with the dormers being more prominent, but in terms of its roof design, it's fairly similar to that's existing at the moment. So in terms of its appearance and so on, we consider it to be acceptable. It complies in terms of the London plan and national standards in terms of its size, and therefore we feel that it is acceptable on that basis, and it is recommended for approval for those reasons. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chapman.
I do remember it coming before the committee a few years ago when it had prior approval, and to some extent our hands were tied on what we could say. Coincidentally, I used to work in this building for about 5 years, and as far as I can tell from the plans, it won't change in as much as there's not step-free access. There's no sort of, I mean, I know within the building I know there's a lift, but there's certainly not step-free access into the building itself initially. Is that not an issue?
Mr. Roger.
Okay. If members wish to address this issue, I think we probably have to do it through the legal agreement. There is a legal agreement proposed. In terms of, I know this doesn't directly answer your question, whether we've done something similar before. We have. There was a site in Useley where there was additional stories being added to a prior approval. If I mention the site, some councillors will maybe be familiar with it. It's one on the corner of Trout Road by the, I think it's the tyre office, the other side of the road, facing Useley Library. And what happened is one of the reasons members approved the additional stories above the prior approval is that there was some accessibility improvements sort of stitched into the planning permission. So so the recommendation doesn't include the accessibility improvement you're referring to, but given that it is for 8 units, so it's, you know, it's a reasonable number of units, I think we could justify an argument, but I think probably we'd actually be going so far as including it in the legal agreement, but I wouldn't mind if the legal officer could comment on my suggestions.
You of course could add a head of term to the agenda today that would capture the requirement for a scheme that would outline a step-free access. I think you would need to consult with the developer to discuss this, to ensure the possibilities of that, but it wouldn't be unreasonable for maybe delegation conversations with the applicant, and if agreements reach, then the decision can be moved forward, and if not, it can come back to committee.
Thank you. From my perspective, I believe that even though we're talking only about a relatively small number of flats, it's 8 flats. We've given ground on with regards to parking. It's a town centre. We've given grounds with regards to private amenity space, namely even balconies. We shouldn't give ground yet again on whether or not this is lifetime home standards. We should insist and hold the land there. And whilst any change to deliver M42 to these flats will be beneficial to the other, it's only with regards to these flats that we are talking about. So the focus is on that, and I believe we should be seeking that head of term improvement. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, for that clarification. I would agree with that view. Can I ask, you know, the parking permits, future occupants prohibited from holding a parking permit, but if they, their state of health becomes such that they need to apply for blue badges, then obviously they can park out on the street. They're not excluded from that, are they? Because that's illegal.
Yeah, but what the definition will say in terms of that is that anybody that holds a blue badge under the Chronically Sick Act, they are excluded, and they can apply for a parking permit as per the usual procedure with the council.
Thank you. For clarification, Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I move officer's recommendation then on
Councillor
that
Bryan,
basis.
you seconding? Thank you. Show of hands, please. Subject to the change to the head of terms. Agreed unanimously. Thank you. And this is the last on the Part 1 agenda. 106 Porters Way, item 13. Mr. Ronnie.
Thank you, Chairman. 106 Porters Way is a 2-storey semi-detached dwelling, and the proposals is for 2-storey side and rear extension, single-storey rear, a single-storey front extension, and its conversion to 3 flats. In terms of the extensions, there have been previous approvals for a 2-storey side extension, and there has been a certificate of lawful development granted for a porch to the front and a single-storey rear extension. However, the proposals increase the size of the extensions, and it's a cumulative impact, if you like, that we feel is an issue here. So it's an increase in the size of this area here by 1 metre in terms of its width, an increase in projection slightly forward, an increase to enclose the staircase to the back here. And then there's the issue about the provision of the amenity space, and again you've got the proposed extensions to the back, and then the amenity space is fairly restricted, as you'll see from the photographs in the aerial. And therefore, we feel that it's the cumulative impact of these changes that makes this unacceptable. The other issue is that this area is proposed as the amenity space for one of the flats, and part of the proposal is to increase the fencing, which is in this position here, in height, or not to increase it, but to replace the existing fencing with a 1.8 metre high fence. And as you'll see from the photographs again, we feel that that will have an impact on the street scene. So if I can just go to the photographs. These are the various proposals, the elevations. So this is looking along Porter's Way, and then at the moment you'll see that this fence here is fairly low level, enclosing the front garden area, or what's normally known as the front garden area, and that part of the fence there, including part of the front here, would be increased in height to 1.8 metres, and we feel that that is unacceptable. And again, it's a cumulative impact. You've got the two-storey side extension. So if I go back to the aerial, you'll see that it is, in terms of its rear garden area, it's fairly restricted. The red outline shows that, and then the building there. So it's the overall impact of these changes that we feel makes the scheme unacceptable for the reasons set out. Thank you, Chairman.
Very much. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. Yes, I do agree with this recommendation, and I do think it's overdevelopment. I do have a query, please, about this external staircase. And on the drawings that we have, in the 3D views that it's shown, it doesn't seem to go up to the first floor. And I think it's going to be a much more intrusive structure than is actually shown on these plans. So I think these plans are a bit misleading. If you look on page 212, you can see the rear staircase going up, and it comes from the closest corner, and then it goes in to the first floor, into flat 3, and it's above the roof. Now, if you look on the page 213, if you look at the proposal there, the flat roof of the adjoining extension is higher. They've actually omitted this staircase. So how you actually get, it shows the door going in, but then it doesn't go anywhere, it just goes into the brick wall. So if I could ask the officers just to comment on that. It seemed to me that they hadn't drawn this correctly, and it had been drawn in a bit of a misleading way, because there's nothing that shows the staircase going up with a doorway which would have to go in at first floor level, in other words, at bedroom level, to go into the building. Do you see what I'm saying?
If I can just come in there, Chairman, this isn't it isn't an external staircase. It is enclosed within the two-storey element of the rear element of it. So if I can just go to the elevations, or this part of it, you'll see that there's a cat slide type roof here, and that's where the staircase goes up.
They put it in there.
Yeah.
They put it in there. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
I felt sure that there was some explanation for it. I wasn't seeing it. Thank you. Thank you. But even so, I do think it contributes to the overall bulk and overdevelopment of the site. The garden areas are very small, being sort of 21, 24 metres, which is hardly larger than most people's living rooms, really.
On that, the issue of overdevelopment is a matter of judgment, and rightly that the committee will take a view on it. And it is not only the additional bit on the stairways; it's also the additional porch, and that has an impact on the street scene. I would like some clarity, please, on the extent of the fencing, because the diagrams shown here are different to that you described, and I want us to be absolutely clear that we are not forming a judgment on misinformation. You've said that the 1.8 metre fencing will come all the way effectively to the forward edge of the property, whereas in fact the diagrams show it stopping level with the side flank wall.
Yeah, so if I can refer you to page 211 and the ground floor layout that's shown there.
Yep.
You'll see that the extent of fencing indicated on the plan there. So in essence, what's shown as 1.8 metre fencing is from this point round here all the way round.
I think
there.
I think if you look at the detail, it says the first bit is 1 metre high fencing.
Yeah, that's this element here. So once you get past, so it's this element here which is 1 metre.
Yes. Yep.
So once you get past that, it's 1.8.
Absolutely. It was clarity on that purpose. It isn't taking the 1.8 all the way forward to the forward edge of the property. It is only that. And there is an issue there on the impact on the street scene, because what is going through my mind is the adequacy of the refusal reason 2, in that I believe each of these private amenity spaces are policy compliant in terms of size.
Yes.
Is that correct?
They are policy compliant. What we're saying is that, and it should be included in reason 2, is the impact of the fencing on the street scene, and if that was taken away, then the amenity space would not be sufficient.
I absolutely agree with that position, that clarification. So there needs to be some adjustment to the wording of condition 2 if we go with officers' recommendations. And my suggestion here is that again the head of planning is asked to just review that wording. Okay, so we've had a view that this is overdevelopment. Any other discussions on this matter?
Can I just ask then, we're saying that this introduction of this 1.8 metre fencing coming along here, which impacts on the openness of this, which has to be introduced in order to secure some private amenity space, are in conflict, and that's, so it will be amended, this reason for refusal will be amended to reflect that.
Yes.
Because otherwise it then starts to impact on the whole character of the area if people can start to put that up, because frontages onto a road should not be more than 1 metre high, for very good reasons.
That is the point. It isn't necessarily the size of the amenity space being proposed that's the issue. It is the fencing necessary to deliver the private space that is at conflict with the character of the area and the street scene.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, sorry, you did move. Is it seconded? Councillor Bearer is seconded. Show of hands. With that amendment, thank you. That's everybody. Another piece of work delegated to you. Thank you. That brings us to the end of part 1. And we can just break and then we'll quickly go into part 2.